Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to do a tier ranking of everything that I checked out within the first quarter of this year. And when I say everything, I'm not including books, as books are what I discuss over on my main channel, and here on Full Meta Analysis I talk about storytelling in all its other forms. I'm going to go through the list of things that I am going to be tier ranking, but I did want to make a little note. If I haven't had the chance to talk about one of these things just yet, then I'm not going to include it because I want to be able to have in the description bar, in case you're interested in any of these, any reviews or discussion videos or things like that for you to reference back to in case you're interested in hearing more about them. Or if I haven't had a chance to talk about something and I don't plan to, then I am allowing myself to include it, and I'll just mention my thoughts very briefly here in this video for those. But there are some things that I've checked out, just not had the opportunity to discuss in any kind of a vlog or review or discussion, and so I'm going to save those for the future. But getting to the things that we're going to be discussing, we have Grave of the Fireflies, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Vox Machina, Elden Ring, which was a replay for me, Tekken 8, Saga, Ponyo, Princess Mononoke, Kiki's Delivery Service, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, The Boy and the Heron, the Spy Family movie Code White, Spy Family Volume 11, Avatar Seasons 1 and 2, Vinland Saga, and then Tokyo Ghoul. I am separating the volumes that I checked out. I did check out Volume 3 and Volume 4, and I have conflicted feelings, as one of the volumes I liked and one of the volumes I didn't like as much, so I'm actually going to separate those and consider them to be two different things. So we're going to start in the middle and then work our way out, as I like to start with the more middle of the road feelings and then get to the more extremes. The really exciting thing is so many of these belonged in the top tier. Really great first quarter for me in regards to all of the other types of stories I check out besides books. So we really only have a couple things in the middle tier, and I like to make rules for myself when I do tier rankings to try and make things more of a challenge. So I had to put at least one thing in every single tier, which was a little difficult actually with the lower tiers, but because I love so much, wasn't really very difficult for the top tiers. But starting with the middle tier, the first thing would be Tekken 8. I am somebody who grew up playing Tekken. It's a fighting game if you don't know. And Tekken Tag to this day is my favorite. I say that pretty much every time I bring up Tekken. It's a fun game as far as if you just want to sit around and play a fighting game and learn combos and watch a bear hit a person with a fish. It's a lot of fun. But as far as being extremely moving or having a really compelling plot, I don't really think it has those things going for it. And I think that has leaned really far into the camp, which is completely fine. But I wouldn't say it's groundbreaking by any means. It's fun, but that's about it for me. So Tekken 8 currently is going in the middle tier. And then from there, Tokyo Ghoul Volume 3. I debated putting this in the second tier, as I did actually quite like this volume, but it just doesn't quite compare to some of the things I have in the second tier. I think I liked this volume. Well, do I like it more than Tekken 8? I don't know. It doesn't matter. I don't want to waste your time and deliberate too much here, but I enjoyed this volume. I didn't really have anything that bothered me about it. I thought maybe it dragged a little bit, but it definitely pushed the plot forward in a direction that I thought was interesting and engaging. Thus, I have it here in this middle tier. And that's it for the two things in this middle tier, which is actually quite exciting. I'll go ahead and get into a negative. So I'm putting Vox Machina in the fourth tier, but I have no problem admitting that I did not really give this show much of a shot. So don't take my word for it. If you've heard good things about the show, if it sounds fun to you, then check it out, because I know for a lot of people it's such a good time and it fills them with so much nostalgia. It's basically a D&D campaign in show format. But I started it, and pretty quickly I don't have any emotional attachments of any kind to anything D&D related, and I also wasn't finding the humor to really be up my alley. So just in general, it wasn't really clicking with me. I can be very picky with television and movies, so I want to add that as well. And if something's not really working, I am pretty quick to be like, no. And as an example, while I didn't check this out this quarter, the show Onimusha, I did something similar with. I watched a little bit of it and I was like, no. And that I was a little biased toward because I grew up I played the original Onimusha, loved it, was a little disappointed with some of the sequels, and then have just waited for that game to make a comeback someday. And so when I saw there was a show, I was like, I mean, the Castlevania, the original Netflix Castlevania was pretty good, so what are we doing here? And then I didn't really like Onimusha, so I shut it off. Anyway, this isn't to do with Onimusha. This is about Vox Machina. My point just being, I'm pretty quick if I'm not clicking with something to be like, I'll do something else, just because there are so many other things I want to check out. So Vox Machina just wasn't for me. I feel, on one hand, I thought about putting it in the bottom tier, but I'm like, well, that's especially not fair, because I really didn't check it out for very long. And I thought about putting it up, but I'm like, but I didn't like what I saw. So it's here just kind of almost by default. Now going up to the second tier, this was pretty tricky. I had to really ask myself, do I want these in the top tier, or are they maybe not quite as high as the ones that I included in the top tier? So for me, these were just barely pushed out, and we have Saga. I have checked out more of Saga, and I continue to really love this. I don't know that I love it as much as some people do. I know fans of the series, some of my friends, my husband, they really, really love this series. It really pulls a lot of gut punches for them, and I agree that that content is present. I just don't know if I've been hit by most things in this as strongly as other people do. I certainly think there's a lot that's emotionally compelling, but I just don't know that it is in my top tier currently. Still really enjoying Saga, though. I also have The Boy and the Heron. While I really enjoyed The Boy and the Heron, it's also so weird and so bizarre, and I think some of the imagery is really creative and inventive, and it's essentially, I think, a metaphor for a lot of components. Eventually, I will do a detailed discussion for The Boy and the Heron. I have talked about it briefly, but I am doing a video series where my friends and I do in-depth discussions, and we've not yet had the chance to talk about The Boy and the Heron, so we'll get to thoughts later on down the road that are more spoilery or more in-depth. But currently, I'll just say that it's very, very weird and an interesting time. It's kind of like Alice in Wonderland, but maybe weirder. It's really bizarre. If you've seen it, I feel like you know. It's basically like, what if Alice in Wonderland also had themes of environmentalism in it and grief? And I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things about Alice in Wonderland that are, of course there are things to dissect about that, but I just mean, what if you took that and then put a Studio Ghibli spin on it? That's The Boy and the Heron. And then after that, I have Nausicaa in this category as well. I did enjoy Nausicaa. I need to still check out I've said this before, that it is said to be a graphic novel, I think, when the movie starts, as opposed to saying it's a manga, so I'm not really sure how to categorize it. But the graphic novel, I'll call it that for now. I still need to check that out. I've heard it fleshes the story out so much more. It certainly feels like in the movie that pieces are missing, but I still did quite enjoy the movie, so I wanted to have it here in this second tier. Now for the things that I have at the bottom. Ponyo, if you saw the discussion video, I don't think this is a surprise. I did not like this movie basically at all, and I'm not one of those people that dislikes kids' movies. I just didn't like this one at all. At all. There was, I mean, it's so, I mean, I don't find it compelling. I found Ponyo super annoying. I thought the little boy was really cute, but pretty much everything else about it I couldn't stand, which makes me a little sad because I think it's the only movie by the studio that I have felt that way about. And I will say, I had the unfortunate, or this movie I should say, unfortunately, I watched it right after watching Princess Mononoke, which, spoiler, I thought was a perfect movie. I loved Princess Mononoke so much, and then I watched Ponyo, and it was late, and I was doing like a double feature with my husband for like a Friday movie night, and so we watched Princess Mononoke. I was so overjoyed at how good it was, in my opinion anyway. I thought it was so good. And then we turned on Ponyo, and I was ready for a tonal shift, but I was like, this feels like such a drop, which I know some people love Ponyo. If you love Ponyo, I'm so sorry, but I couldn't stand it. So Ponyo's at the bottom. But now, getting into the one other thing here, and then we'll launch ourselves up at the top. Tokyo Ghoul Volume 4. I did not care for this volume. I thought it derailed the plot quite a bit. I thought it went in so many directions. It felt meandering. It just dilly-dallied a little too much. And then when it did get to plot points, I didn't care for those plot points. However, I was considering stopping this series after that volume because I really didn't care for it. But one of you made a very compelling argument for continuing on, so I am going to keep going with Tokyo Ghoul. I don't know that I'm going to make any promises that I'm going to read all of the first chunk and all of the second chunk. However, I do plan to give it more of a shot. So I really didn't care for that fourth volume, but I'm hoping it's just a little hiccup in what is otherwise a great series. Now going to the top, which I'm just going to probably list off most of these because I have talked about them so much. We'll go ahead and just say Princess Mononoke because I was just singing its praises. I loved this movie. I loved the creativity. I loved the themes. I thought it was morally gray in the best of ways where you care about the characters. You also are frustrated with certain characters, but certain characters certainly have motivations that you understand. There's also certain characters that are very nuanced, where certain things they're doing, you understand why they're doing them, and you actually support certain things, but in order for them to accomplish this good deed, they're also contributing to something bad that affects other people negatively, and I just loved it. I loved it. I love the main character. Oh, he's one of my top tier protagonists of all time now. I loved him so much. I thought this movie was fantastic. Loved it, loved it, loved it. I also have Elden Ring. This was, again, I think I stated this before. I was replaying Elden Ring, had a ton of fun. Can't wait for Shadow of the Erdtree. I don't know that I need to say too much else. I can't wait. I can't wait for that DLC. It's going to be so good, or at least I hope it will. It'll probably be really aggravating, but I'm looking forward to it. And then we have Grave of the Fireflies. I debated putting this in the second tier, but ultimately, I think that this is a phenomenal movie. I think the reason I debated putting it in the second tier is just because it's so bleak, and I tend to prefer when stories have a full range of emotions. However, I just don't think that's really what this movie was, and I don't think that that makes it worse, though. I think that it's just one of those exceptional... it's an exception to my rule that... just because it didn't go through the full range does not mean it isn't top tier, in my opinion. I thought it was a masterpiece, but if you've not seen it or you don't know anything about it, just be ready because it is absolutely devastating, but also very good. From there, Kiki's Delivery Service. This one's so cute. This one I also debated for the opposite reason. It doesn't really have those extremely hard-hitting gut punches, although the end... if you know, there's something to do with, communication, I'll say, because I don't want to spoil it if you don't know, that's really devastating, but it's not devastating in the same way. However, in some ways, that's what makes this brilliant, is you see the depth of, you know, the human spirit and experiences in life. You see it through the little things and the changes along the way through life, and it's so cute and wholesome, and I adored this. It's so darling. If you haven't seen this movie, you should check it out. If you just need to feel happy, but also a tad melancholy, and I can't sing its praises enough. I loved it. I loved it so much. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. While I have certain criticisms and I have some complaints, overall, as an open world RPG and a remake of something that I love, it's been a lot of fun. It has the occasional thing that is an annoyance. It has the occasional thing that is, I think, a little on the tedious side. And I don't love certain changes they've made. However, that's me being, I think, a little bit on the nitpicky side. I still think it's absolutely exceptional. I might have the unpopular opinion of thinking the amount of praise I've seen for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and then the amount of criticisms I've seen for 16 don't really make sense to me. I think there should be a few more criticisms of 7 Rebirth and a little more praise for 16. Now, you can feel totally different. That's completely fine. However, and maybe I have just seen certain things, and maybe my perception is incorrect because I've only seen certain discussions and circles of the internet talking about these, but I see so many people talking about how Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is Game of the Year, Game of the Year, Game of the Year, and Final Fantasy 16, which isn't on the list today, so I don't know why I'm talking about this, but I'll see people say, like, oh, it's such a disappointment, it's too dark. There's a gnat if you see me doing this. It's too dark. It needs more of the campy moments and the funny moments, which is fine if that's how you personally feel. But it's just odd to me that I've seen such negative reactions. I'm not saying people literally hate 16. I just mean, in comparison, I'm kind of surprised that people act like one is certainly subpar and the other one is going to be the best thing that comes out this year. It's one of the best Final Fantasy entries we've ever gotten. And anyway, I'm curious if you are a fellow Final Fantasy fan or just a fellow video game player. If you know what I'm talking about, if you've seen that, do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm interested in your thoughts on that. Anyway, main point, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I'm putting in the top tier. Vinland Saga, this is not a surprise. I love this series, so rereading it, of course, it's going to be at the top. I can't wait for when I do discussions for this. I've mentioned that I might do a similar format to what I've been doing with Avatar's show, which it's not a manga, but the way I've been going through Avatar, I might do that for the Vinland Saga anime, but I'm still considering doing discussions for the manga itself as well. So I've yet to determine that, but I think I'm leaning toward doing both. Anyway, I think Vinland Saga is amazing. If you haven't checked it out, highly recommend. It is exceptional. Probably the best revenge story. It's certainly a revenge story, but there's so much more to it that it doesn't feel right to categorize it as that. Anyway, I highly recommend that one. I mentioned Avatar a second ago. Avatar. It's been great. I have had such a blast watching it. I think it's a great show. I now understand the hype for it. I'm starting to know certain references, like when people talk about Iroh. Now I know who Iroh is, and he's so sweet. And these characters, I love Aang. Anyway, I don't need to turn this into a whole Avatar gush session. And then Spy Family Volume 11 and the Spy Family movie are both up here in this tier. Volume 11 is my favorite volume. I've decided. I loved Volume 10, and I was debating. I'm like, oh, was Volume 11 better? I think it was. It was so devastating, though, and in ways I wasn't expecting, while simultaneously, of course, because of Spy Family, being ridiculous. So, loved it. The movie was so dumb and so fun, and the best time, and if you've seen the movie, I'm sure you know, Anya needing to go to the bathroom and having basically a hallucination, or I don't know, maybe she had, like, divine intervention. It's up for debate. But regardless, weirdest scene I've seen in a long time in a movie. And my husband, his father, I've joked with his father that he's gonna die laughing because his dad, when he really laughs, I actually get concerned. He gets so red. I feel like he falls out of his chair a lot. And I've told him before, I think you're gonna go because something makes you laugh a lot. And I kind of want to show him that movie, but I'm like, I think it'll be the death of him. Because I think that whole segment, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. I think that whole segment would end his life. And I'm like, I don't want to be responsible for that. But he has told me it doesn't sound like the worst way to go. So maybe, I don't know. That's it for my tier ranking of the things that I got around to in the first quarter. As I said before, if there's anything that I've mentioned that you're interested in hearing more thoughts, I'll have reviews, discussions, vlogs in the description bar down below. Really excited for what's around the corner for the second quarter of this year. It's been a great year so far for all of the kinds of stories that I enjoy checking out. As you can see, it was pretty much primarily just me excited about things. So anyway, based off of the things that I mentioned loving, if you'd like to give your own recommendations or anything like that, feel free. If you have your own thoughts on anything I mentioned, definitely let me know in the comments down below. But I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.